Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Screenstars and welcome to another of my classic James Bond reviews. Today I'm taking a look at Roger Moore's last outing as James Bond, 1985's A View to a Kill. The film is directed by John Glenn and it stars, of course, Roger Moore. We have Christopher Walken, Tanya Roberts, Grace Jones and Patrick Macnee. This time Bond is chasing down the villainous Max Zorin, played by Christopher Walken, who has essentially got plans on taking down the whole computer industry, basically, and controlling it all. And it's up to Bond to put a stop to it. Right. What are my thoughts on A View to a Kill? Well, this one gets... Probably a lot of people would say this is probably the weakest Roger Moore outing, that with Man with the Golden Gun. It's one that kind of gets, I don't know, the most criticisms, I suppose. But I've always had a bit of a soft spot for this one. I can't lie, really. I've always felt it was a pretty strong Bond film. Now, and I've always felt as well, and I'm rewatching it for this review, I've always felt that if this film had been made like straight after Spy Who Loved Me or Moonraker or something like that, you know, when it was peak Roger Moore, I think it probably would have been received better and remembered more fondly. Because I think at the very core of this, it's got a lot of the good ingredients that make the Bond films good. It's got a great title song by Duran Duran that, you know, I think it's right up there with the best. You know, it kind of, the whole idea was to try and bring in a more youthful audience sort of thing to Bond. It's got good villains. I think Max Zorin's played by Christopher Walken, is a strong, memorable villain. I think he's very good, and Christopher Walken is awesome in everything that he does. But I liked his villain here. But it kind of has come under a little bit of criticism, the film, because it kind of overly violent in regards to certainly Max Zorin and, you know, his mass murdering exploits and stuff. But I just, you know, I've always liked him as the villain here. And Grace Jones, I mean, as Mayday. Very, very memorable. Say what you want about Grace Jones, but every time she's ever done a movie, she's been memorable. Conan the Destroyer, very memorable. Mayday in this, very, very memorable. I remember when I was young, I remember being quite cringe about it, Grace Jones in this, but you really can appreciate her a lot more when you kind of watch it like through mature eyes, if you like. Apparently, they didn't get on, Roger Moore and Grace Jones, and Roger Moore didn't have a lot of positive things to say about Grace Jones following the film. But I think Grace Jones kind of felt differently. I think it's been written, I think in her autobiography or something, that she actually really quite liked Roger Moore and he was very helpful to her. But she sort of also said that she probably thinks that there was no chemistry there offset because she chose to stay in character and her character was to hate James Bond. So that's why she was always so cold towards him. So maybe it was like miscommunications, if you like. But yeah, they didn't really get on. And funnily enough, Tanya Roberts as well was supposedly quite difficult on set and quite demanding. So he didn't get on with her particularly as well. And that kind of shows in the film. I do think that the Bond girls here are strong. I mean, Tanya Roberts is absolutely stunning, but not given a great deal to do, if I'm being honest. But and Grace Jones, who is obviously a good villain here, turns out to be a heroic character by the end, which I always kind of had issue with, and I still do a little bit. The fact that, you know, spoiler alert, you know, she kills Patrick Macnee's character, Tibbet, who, let's be honest, we all was very saddened by when we watched the film, and it saddened me again watching it because I forgot about it. And it definitely got to Bond. And he must have known that she killed him. and she's quite happy to kill quite a few other people in this. So the fact that she turns face rather than heel at the end of the film, I always kind of had a little bit of a problem with that. I'm not sure Bond would put up with that really, but there we are, sort of thing. We also get the first on-screen appearance of Dolph Lundgren, who was Grace Jones' boyfriend at the time. He was not an actor, and I think he was on set with Grace Jones, and the director saw his size and put him in the film as a KGB agent. So it's a kind of blink and you'll miss it moment, but he's definitely there. Interestingly, I think the part was the Max Zorin part was offered to David Bowie, but he turned it down, and he went on to do Labyrinth, I think it was. So yeah, there was other actors in mind initially for Zorin, like I say, David Bowie, and I think Rutger Hauer. There was interest with him as well, but I think going with Christopher Walken was a stroke of genius, really. I mean, the guy's just a legend in regards to acting, and he hams it up in this film. I think he's a good, memorable villain here. You could argue most of these villains' plots in these Bond films are a bit bonkers and, would never really work in a real world scenario. But, show me a Bond film where the villains' motives do make sense, because they very, very often don't. There are a couple of cringe moments here and there. That awful Beach Boys song at the beginning kicking in when he goes on the surfboard on the snow. I mean, it's properly cringe. I wish they wouldn't do that. It's similar to the Tarzan thing in Octopussy. It's just like, it takes you a few minutes to get into it again, because you completely lose the immersion in the film. I don't know why they choose to do stuff like that. And then obviously the elephant in the room, Roger Moore. Now, obviously, even he admits it. He was getting too old for the role by this point. He was getting too old for the role in the last film, you could argue. And he only came back in the last one because Sean Connery was coming to do Never Say Never Again. So I'm surprised he returned for another one. I suspect it's a case of money talks. I do believe they had Timothy Dalton on standby to do this film in case he didn't return, and obviously we know Timothy Dalton turned up for the next two. But I actually think he just manages to get away with it here, Roger Moore. And like I say, I think this would have been a much better and more memorable Bond if it had kind of been made at Roger Moore's peak in regards to his, peak Bond times, like, 77, 78 type of times. But I do think he just manages to get away with it here, even though Roger Moore has been quoted as saying this is his least favourite Bond for a number of reasons. He felt he was getting too old for the part, and he wasn't keen on the violence in the film, which is rich, really, coming from someone that's played Bond since 1971. Is it? No, 73. So, I actually, I've got, fond memories of this film. This is one of the Roger Moore films that I've probably watched the most. And I have to say, after reviewing all the Roger Moore films, I've done all the Sean Connerys now, and I've done all the Roger Moores. I think Roger Moore's body of work as Bond is very, very strong. I don't think he really has ever made a dud as a James Bond film. Obviously, there might be some that are considered worse than others, like Man with the Golden Gun, and even this one. But I think this one has its merits. I think it's very, very entertaining. I think it feels big budget when you're watching it. There's a couple of cringe moments, but I think it's actually quite a strong Bond film. It's got a lot of the elements that you need in a Bond film to make it good. And if you actually lay out Roger Moore's Bond films, they are all, most of them, like solid 7 out of 10s at least, arguably less, obviously, because I think I scored Man with the Golden Gun a little bit less. But, you know, there's an argument for Man with the Golden Gun to be given a 7 as well, really, if you really wanted to. So he's done a lot of 7s, which is a decent score. And obviously some have been elevated, like the Spire Love Me and Moonraker and all this kind of stuff, and Live and Let Die. So he's done some pretty solid work here as Bond. And I can say this now, I've reviewed Sean Connery's and Roger Moore's. Roger Moore was always my Bond because I grew up with him. It's like Doctor Who. It's which Doctor Who you grew up with. I grew up with Peter Davison, Tom Baker, and then Peter Davison. But it was my formative years as Peter Davison, so therefore it feels like he's my Doctor Who. It feels like Roger Moore's my Doctor Who because it's the one I grew up with as a film reviewer now, a critiquing person, whatever you want to call me. I can recognise that Sean Connery is the quintessential Bond. And it feels like, you know, the part was written for Sean Connery, and when he nailed it in films like Goldfinger and From Russia with Love, he was unmatchable as Bond. But I think the tongue-in-cheek approach that Sean Connery settled on with Bond when he finally got comfortable with the character in Spy Who Loved Me, I think it showed just what a great Bond he was. So, yeah, thank you very much, Sir Roger Moore. You were a tremendous James Bond, and I'm looking forward now to checking out Timothy Dalton's 2 outings as James Bond. It'll be The Living Daylights next. So, thanks for joining me, guys, for this review. I shall see you very, very soon.